there, I'm your host, Ricky Shockley, and welcome to the MedSpa Success Strategies podcast, where MedSpa and aesthetics practice owners come to discover strategies and tactics that help them better market and manage their practices so they can grow, scale, and have more financial freedom. I'm excited to be joined today by Jake Laban. Jake is co-founder, president, and CFO of Skin by Lovely, a chain of medical aesthetic practices in California, Oregon, and Washington that has been recognized by Inc. magazine, Portland Business Journal, the Los Angeles Business Journal as one of the country's fastest growing private companies for more than 5 straight years. Jake has 20 years of commercial and executive experience in the medical aesthetics industry and now serves as an advisor, investor, board member, and consultant to several other companies in the medical aesthetic industry. Previously, Jake was the U.S. head of aesthetic portfolio marketing for Allergan, where he played a key role in the launch of BOTOX Cosmetic, Juvéderm, and Allergan's patient loyalty program known as Alle. He holds an MBA in finance from Pepperdine University, a BS in management and entrepreneurship from the University of Connecticut, and a postgraduate certificate in medical marketing from the Anderson School of Business at UCLA. So anyways, yes, we're talking about your background with Allergan and how you got into the industry in the first place here.
Introduced to a gentleman while I was attending Pepperdine University, getting my master's in finance, and met a guy named Brett, who said, I work for this pharmaceutical company down the street. I was working for Johnson & Johnson at the time. He said, we're about to launch a product that's going to get rid of wrinkles. It's going to be called BOTOX, and we're looking for a junior marketer on the team. I'd love to introduce you. So all those years ago, got in really on the ground floor of this industry, which has been kind of a wild ride over the last 21, 22 years. It's been amazing to watch this grow, and lucky to be a part of it.
And I know you obviously worked your way up within Allergan. So you said you just started as a junior marketing rep and worked your way up. How long were you with the company, and what was that kind of ascension there in terms of the corporate ladder? What did that look like for you?
Well, 7.5 of really the best years of my life. I've got really nothing but great things to say about the time I spent at Allergan and the people that I worked with. As we'll get along further in my story, if it wasn't for one woman, I probably never would have left. I'd probably still be there today. But started out as a junior marketer managing communications for both the BOTOX Cosmetic and BOTOX Therapeutic team. BOTOX Cosmetic was still in startup mode, so was really put together with the therapeutic team. So it was really great for me to see all the therapeutic benefits of BOTOX, helping, I had a chance to work with this world-class pianist that had played Carnegie Hall several times, that BOTOX was able to alleviate his focal dystonia. So he was able to literally play the piano again. He was unable to do that. Reading stories about little kids with lower limb spasticity and the relief and the trauma that the families went through. So seeing that there was so much more to BOTOX than just the superficiality, that was great for me early on. Later on, became a regional sales manager in New York City, New England. Came back in-house to lead the BOTOX Cosmetic marketing efforts on the professional side, and then later on helped out with the entire portfolio. As we launched Juvéderm, was involved with the launch of some various Natrelle breast implant lines, launching Latisse. We launched a skincare line, so there was a whole portfolio of aesthetic products that I was lucky enough to be able to touch and see from that perspective, from the corporate perspective, from the in-house perspective. That really helped me a lot later on doing what I do now. And it was a fantastic ride. So, just hello to all my old friends at Allergan. I miss working with you all.
And coincidentally, I think if I read correctly, you had something to do with the Alle, the rewards program, the creation of that.
Well, I worked on the precursor of what was the Alle program. It was led by my office mate, who I shared a wall with for a couple of years. She's moved on to great things and now works for another company leading things globally. But it started out as a BOTOX benefits program. It was actually a card that you had to swipe within the offices. So our representatives were out there actually configuring credit card terminals and jerry-rigging them so that they could accept this BOTOX benefits card, which was managed through by a third-party vendor, and basically a number of spreadsheets that I remember my partner would get so frustrated with on a daily basis. Every morning I'd hear her screaming about it. It was thinking back to those days, which was the precursor to Alle. This was something that really recognized that retention and loyalty was the key to long-term success in this industry, not just in the products that you sell from a corporate level. But I think this is a lesson that can be taken to the practice level for all the clients of yours, Ricky, to all of us out here who run our own medical spas and other medical aesthetic practices. The BOTOX benefits card, the rewards program that ultimately became Alle, that became Brilliant Distinctions, and then ultimately became Alle. What that did was recognize that there's a stickiness to a loyalty program. And now what Alle does is has taken it to almost like a gamification where you want to start to build up your points and you're checking your points all the time, kind of like an airline rewards program. But now they've taken it to a point where they've got this robust Allergan Data Labs business unit, which is tremendous. And that's really what we're seeing in all sorts of areas of technology where data is king. And Allergan has been masterful at leading the way at creating this best-in-class rewards program that there are other imitators out there that do a fine job, but Allergan's ahead by a mile or more. And it's been fun to watch that program become what it is today and really become a form of currency, quite literally. It's, we look at it as free money, but also a form of currency in terms of patient choice. Sometimes patients will choose a specific brand of product based on, do they want to use their Alle points? Do they want to use their Aspire points? Are they agnostic to that? But it's really been interesting in how it has changed some of the dynamics of our industry. But thinking back to those early days, managing this program on spreadsheets, I mean, it seems prehistoric, but that's what it was back then.
Yeah, I thought it was coincidental too. We're talking here on November 16th when we're recording this episode, and I believe today is Botox Day.
Yeah, I was reminded of that this morning. My wife, her name is Lovely. So yes, Skin by Lovely. There is really a person named Lovely. I'm married to her. The long story short, she was born on a hippie commune and hippie parents, but thus the name Lovely. But Lovely was walking out this morning with her Botox vial earrings that she wears for her Botox Day. So that's these wonderful earrings that our friend Nancy Pellegrino down in Newport Beach made for her. So shout out to Nancy for creating Lovely's jewelry today.
That's awesome. Yeah, so that is a perfect segue into how you met your wife and how the Skin by Lovely business started. You want to just give us a little bit of background on that story?
The boy meets girl story. Okay, this is what everyone wants, Ricky. So it was
juicy.
Summer, yes, the juicy stuff. Summer of 2008, Labor Day of 2008. I was obviously living in Orange County, working at Allergan, having a great time there. Was visiting a friend in LA who invited me to come along to a house party that he was going to. He said on the way over, the hostess, her name is Lovely. She injects Botox. She's a nurse. You might, get along with her. And, for whatever reason, I pictured someone, I'm not sure, short and overweight and unattractive with glasses. I have no idea why that popped in my mind on the way over. But then we walk in the condo and I see this vision of beauty standing over in the kitchen in her condo. And I realized very quickly, this is a setup. And, went over and made nice talk, and we met and had great conversation that night. We spoke the next day and every day thereafter. So a few months into dating, she shared with me, because I knew at that point that she was working for a small medical spa in Beverly Hills. Previously, she had spent a few years working as the lead injector for what was then the largest Botox clinic in the country by volume. So she had a lot of experience with it, but now she's working for this smaller place. And this was going into the 08-09 recession. And her checks were bouncing. She wasn't happy. She wasn't getting support. And she said, I've always wanted to own my own practice by the time I'm 30, and I'm coming up on 30. And I said, well, I've been doing this for a while for Allergan. I've had the entire country. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. I've seen a lot of these things start up. I've seen some fail. So I have an idea of what to do, and I could probably help you. So we created, ultimately this was a boyfriend helping a girlfriend out, but we helped her create Skin by Lovely in February of 2009, hooked her up with an attorney, helped her get the appropriate medical direction and physician ownership in the state of California, got all of that done, and, started out really just so she could really have her own thing. A year later, we decided to, get married, get engaged, and it got to a point where I had to make a decision. So there was obviously a little bit of a conflict of interest there. It's one thing for your girlfriend to have her own clinic and be a customer of yours. It's a whole different thing if it's your wife and it's the same household. So middle of 2010, I decided to part ways with Allergan. So like I mentioned earlier in the interview, if it wasn't for Lovely, I'd probably still be at Allergan today. But I did have to make a choice. And Ricky, I chose Love or Lovely in this case.
I love that. So you mentioned there, like you felt like you had all of these experiences from obviously your time in the industry and seeing businesses that were succeeding and failing. Can you just go into some of those initial thoughts when you were helping with the original concept for Skin by Lovely and launching a spa? What things were you focused on that you knew were the catalyst to creating a successful business?
Yeah, great question. So, the med spa term really had just been launched, and there's a lot of debate around who really created this concept of a medical spa. I know some folks on the West Coast that stake the claim to owning that term. And I know one gentleman back in New York City who I used to work with very closely who stakes the claim to be the person who created the first medical spa. The truth is it was somewhere around the 2002 to 2004 timeframe where this concept of a luxury medical experience came about. And there were a lot of things that happened at that time. So that helped give me one lens into what a future could look like. Number two, you had basically a market at that point that was dominated by dermatologists. And, they had an infrastructure and an office space and a customer orientation that was really built around medical dermatology because that's what they had learned and that's what they had done sometimes for decades. Also, you had a number of plastic surgeons. Now, they had a very different approach to the market that was focused on larger transactions, and they saw this injectable business as something that was a great adjunct. The laser business was well established at that point. So I had the benefit of seeing all of these different things. And if I were to pick out a couple of different examples from my experience that framed what Skin by Lovely became as, keep in mind, I'm advising my girlfriend at this point. Fact number one, she was 29 years old and she's admitted publicly she was flat broke at the time. So there was no investment money. We were in the middle of a recession at that point. So lean and mean. Okay, so check that box. We need to be lean and mean, and we don't have a big budget. So that ruled out something like, I think there was this I think about my time in New York City way back when there was one of the first big VC-backed med spas. This was 03, 04. It was called Skin Clinic. It was up near the Museum of Natural History in the Upper East Side. It was to this day, the most magnificent physical location I've ever seen as a medical spa. Glass everywhere, waterfalls, a pond outside. It was just so completely over the top. Ford Modeling Agency models were it seemed to be like a hiring criteria that they had for their staff there. It was the most unreal thing that I had ever seen. But that went under in about 18 months. There just was not the financial resources to sustain it. On the other side of that spectrum was more where I guided Lovely. And I think about a long-term friend of mine. I just was talking with him last week, a gentleman named Steve Yolen, who is a brilliant ophthalmologist and educator in Newport Beach. A longtime friend of mine. I used to work with he and his wife, Eileen, on projects years ago during my time with Allergan. He's really one of the BOTOX thought leaders. What's so cool about Steve's practice was that it was kind of no frills. It was just him. It was just Dr. Yolen, just doing his Botox and doing his fillers in his small office. That was as lean and mean and streamlined as you got. But he would admit back then there was not much in the way of marketing or polish or anything else. And I think he'd still admit that today. So we said, okay, there's got to be a middle point. So how can you have something that has some marketing polish and a little bit of approachability and something that kind of hits a spot in the market that's not there? And so what if you combine the two? What if you can combine the two on a low budget? And that's really what we tried to do with Skin by Lovely. We were able to help Lovely get into a very small space. It was 1,100 square feet on Wilshire Boulevard in Santa Monica. The marketing budget was pretty much non-existent at that point. So what we relied on, we looked at what were some of the free tools that we have out there available to us. And I'm sure that's what you advise a lot of your clients on right now. What can we get for free to maximize our return on investment? And there was this little website that was catching a lot of traction up in San Francisco on the dining scene called Yelp that had just started to spread down to Los Angeles at that point. And we saw that there were a couple of people that were using that to promote their medical aesthetic practices. And we thought, well, geez, there's a no-cost way where we can do things. And we started encouraging people to leave reviews on Yelp. Very quickly, Skin by Lovely became the number one office that you'd see when you would Yelp request BOTOX Santa Monica or BOTOX Los Angeles. And it was that early success that ultimately, I think, drove many of the other things, because right around that same time, Facebook opened themselves up to business pages. So and this was back in the day when if you put something on Facebook, 100% of your following would see it, and you'd very likely get a great response. So we were able to put out same day offers to a following of, it was a few hundred people at that time, but that was still significant, and we'd fill the schedule with it. It was fantastic. So we were very lucky to kind of hit the wave just at the right time as it was starting to build and way before it crested, and ride that social media wave that allowed Skin by Lovely to get to a point of relative market leadership on very little marketing dollars that, ultimately it was a springboard for another business that I created. Remember, I was unable to get paid by Skin by Lovely. I had already left my job at Allergan, and I was working as a consultant in aerospace and manufacturing and doing all sorts of different things just to pay the bill and keep our new household going. But ultimately, it was a springboard for a medical aesthetic focused digital marketing agency, much like what you run now, Ricky.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love that. I just got off a call right before this, and that was so perfect timing with what you talked about being lean and mean. And you have to figure out when you're a smaller spawn, you're just trying to start off, you don't have a marketing budget. You can't spend a bunch of money on Google ads or Facebook ads. You have to figure out those things that you can do that are free, that are going to at least get you some traction and get the ball rolling. And you're right. I think it's changed, but I think there are still those things out there. There's still opportunities, I think, organically with social media. Reviews are still critically important, even things that are offline, like networking. And you just really, when you're at that level, you have to scratch and claw for that initial business to kind of get the ball rolling. So yeah, I love that. In terms of like the pitfalls, is there anything specifically you were trying to avoid as you kind of were guiding Skin by Lovely in its launch? Things that you saw, you mentioned that practice in New York that went under because it was very extravagant. Maybe there weren't the financial resources. Was there anything else that you saw or you experienced with your time with Allergan that you thought, hey, I want to make sure I'm not doing that, or we're not doing that?
Great question. It's something that it's a kind of a strategic maxim, I'll call it, that we still use to this day. It's not to spread ourselves too thin. And there's a few reasons for that. Number one, financial. If you spread yourselves too thin and you offer too many treatment modalities, and this could be energy devices or adjunctive regenerative medicine treatments, if you get into things that aren't at the core of your business, you water down your financial resources. Secondly, at a provider level, you have to have a medical professional that can administer these treatments, and they can only be expert in so many things. So you start to water that down. Third is at an administrative level. You have to train your administrative staff to be eloquent about the different modalities on the telephone when people are calling. They can only be expert at so many different things. So you start to water down their expertise if you offer too many things. That has really driven what Skin by Lovely is, even to this day, is a very lean and mean menu of services. There is neurotoxin injectables, dermal fillers, and medical grade skincare for people to take home. That's it. That's all that we offer.
Yeah.
And what that allows, so our reason to believe, our point of differentiation is that this is what we do all day, every day. With our focus on injectables only, it allows you, the patient, to feel comfortable that you've got the best chance for a great outcome and the lowest chance of a bad outcome. But if something does go wrong, because that does happen sometimes, you get a dropped brow, you get something where you get a little asymmetry. We've seen it all, and we give you the best chance of correcting it. So it gives people peace of mind, and this is important. And a lot of this was informed by my days back at Allergan and looking at all the market research that funneled these multi-million-dollar ad campaigns. The biggest fear to this day, and this hasn't changed in 20 years, the biggest fear, they now call it an unnatural look. We used to call it frozen face back in our Botox days, but the biggest fear is that unnatural look. So there is comfort in our expertise. There's comfort in the focus that we have. And that's something where not a lot of other, and I'm going through this for the benefit of your listeners, because this is an exercise I encourage all of your customers to go through. Who are you? Who do you want to be? What makes you different? We chose to ignore a lot of the other things. We don't get into body work. We don't have cool sculpting. We don't have a single energy device. Nothing else. We've chosen to focus on what we focus on. So there are many other medical aesthetic practice owners that would say that's foolish because you're letting your customers go out and go get a service somewhere else. And that's fair. I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to do it. So far, this has worked quite well for us, being really experts in the practice and being able to operate at a higher level or higher end of the markets that we serve. But that's a very long answer to, your very succinct question about what did I learn way back when that informs us today, and it's focus. Just focus. Know who you are, know what you stand for, and be able to articulate it well to your patients.
Yeah, I love that. And so just a real quick follow-up on that is we always talk about differentiation and trying to make sure that you're trying to give people a tangible reason to believe that you're going to create that superior outcome. So you're doing that obviously in part by exclusively focusing on the fillers and Botox and things like that. Is there anything that you do with your marketing to make that really tangible for someone who hasn't come in yet? Is it before and afters? Is it explaining the fact that you are only specialized in this one area and that you're not doing all these other things and that these people that are in the office, they're doing this all day? Like, how do you make that tangible from a marketing perspective, I guess?
You've hit on a few of them there, Ricky, is the before and afters, the photos. That certainly tells the story. We'll do lots of videos, capture lots of content. Our marketing team does a great job of capturing that. All of it is demonstrating what we do with the injectables. We do some print advertising up here in the Pacific Northwest. We've got a location in Santa Monica, but then we have our Pacific Northwest locations. We have 3 of them. Print doesn't work very well in LA, but in the Pacific Northwest, it still does get a little bit of traction, where we'll focus on the fact that we're Oregon's #1 Botox clinic since 2016. We don't go as far as to be overt and talk about things like trust our experience. This is what we do all day, every day. We'll do 26,000 injectable treatments this year. We don't quite go that far, and perhaps we should. And that is something that we're evaluating. We're doing our brand planning for next year right now and looking at refreshing some of our messaging. But differentiating, that is an absolutely critical point, Ricky, in driving that reason to believe.
Yeah, and one of the things, to circle back to one of the things we touched on earlier, was the importance of, and this has been kind of a common theme in the last few episodes, is the importance of repeat business. And you talked about this with the Alle program and how that kind of helps with generating repeat business. And we've had now, I've been talking to people that are really pushing the idea of memberships at their spas. Is that something that you all do? Do you have any thoughts on that as a strategy for helping with retention?
I'm a huge fan of membership programs. We don't yet offer them. We will be rolling one out next year. We've been doing a lot of research. We want to be very thoughtful around this because there's a few big picture dynamics at work right here. So there's a softening of certain pockets of our market. What we're seeing specifically, and given the higher cost of living in Los Angeles and the Portland, Oregon metro, there is a certain spectrum or a certain segment of the economic spectrum that we serve that has been adversely impacted by some of the economic conditions of inflation and everything else that we're seeing this year. So we've seen certain patients fall off this year as they postpone treatments or defer or go find lower cost alternatives. And we see that in our numbers through the new patients that we serve, through our retention, and then we also see that our average revenue per ticket is at an all-time high, which is driven by the fact that we still have the upper 80-85% of the patient base that we've served over the years that aren't as price sensitive. Retention is absolutely critical. I gave a talk last night online to a group in El Paso, and we spent a lot of time talking about retention because the theme of the program was around growth drivers, practice growth, and how you do it. Everyone focuses on how do I get new patients, and that's great and that's wonderful, and you need to do that. But in our industry, what we know is that one half of the first time injectable patients, 50% of them won't come back for number two, won't come back for the second visit for a host of reasons. They just didn't get along with the injector. They found the parking inconvenient. They didn't like the results. It was too much, or they found someone that was lower cost. There's lots of different reasons why. But what we know, what the data shows us, is getting to that second appointment is the single most important thing. The drop-off rate is incredibly high industry-wide. So we're tracking ours, and what we've focused on is getting to that second visit and putting as much stickiness into the relationship as we possibly can. So some of the things that we do for retention, it's very simple. It's very not sexy. It's very not flashy. Like when you go into a dentist's office, they rebook you for 6 months out. The dentistry has got this licked where they are always rebooking you for the next visit. Why aren't we doing that in medical aesthetics? So at Skin by Lovely, that's something that we're absolutely focused on, where it's the provider looking the patient in the eye and saying, I want to see you back in 3 months. And, Haley is going to book you right now. That's number one. Number two is we have this great little new patient bag. You talk about some offline marketing ideas. One that I offer up, it's a simple little new patient bag that we create. People love free stuff. They love goodie bags. And so we have this nice little branded bag with a bunch of little freebies in there, some branded items from us, but then also we collect items from our partners in the community. Because we're a pure play injectable practice, we don't offer facials, we don't offer lasers, we don't offer fake lashes and all of these other different procedures that might be complementary. We can go out to those partners in the market and say, hey, we have this great patient database. You have a patient database. Let's promote each other. And by the way, here's a vehicle that we use. We give this bag to all of our new patients. We would love to put some of your promotional items in there. If you have a freebie to drive people into your front door, fantastic. So what this does, it creates just a little bit of a bonus. It's like that free gift with purchase that obviously I'm not a consumer that goes to the makeup counters at the department store. But that's a tactic that they've used for years, the free gift with purchase. That is so much better than the discount. That's something that will drive loyalty. It's a high perceived value that doesn't cost quite as much. So all of these things it's really all around retention and loyalty. Now, memberships was what you originally asked me about. There aren't a high number, at least according to the folks that I've asked that have more national focus that are working in industry. There is not a high percentage of medical aesthetic practices that are offering membership programs at this point. I think that's going to change very quickly because you have a lot of electronic medical records or EMR systems that practice management software systems that offer this as a low cost or no cost bolt-on. Meaning Ricky can sign up to be a member at Skin by Lovely and you're auto charge, whatever dollars per month every month. We've been doing some research around what would be the best fit for us. Also, we just moved away from an EMR system that did not have the ability to do that. We've just recently moved into one that will allow us to do it. So this is something that will be a part of what we do. But we need to think about, and this is something I'd advise everyone to do, is think strategically about what do you want this membership program to do. On one end, you could offer, go with, what you'd see, think about your Apple or your Google Play store. You've got some of those memberships that are $2.99 a month, and you kind of forget about them. You know that they're there. They're hitting your credit card every month. You don't care too much. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got the higher end membership programs that might cost you $300-400 a month, but you're banking money for future Botox, for future fillers. So that's something where we're thinking strategically about what do we want out of it? We know we want stickiness. We know we want retention. Where on that spectrum will we fall? Low cost or high cost? Not banking money, just some special pricing and some member-only freebies, or banking money and providing more of a VIP experience. So that's something for us in 2023 and just the thought process where we're at now.
That's great. So going back to your note there that it's critically important to get people back for that second visit, and talking about those new patient bags and leveraging partners in the community to do gift plus purchase. And I know a lot of spas, they really lean heavily on new patient promos and discounts to get people in the door for that first visit. Are there any other strategies? Do you ever consider discounting as an effective strategy to get people in for that second service? Or do you really like that to be a one and done if people are coming in for the first time and use the purchase plus gift strategy? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's always different ways to go about this, but we do, much like other practices and what you just alluded to, we have a new patient discount. We will offer a pre-booking discount, which will give someone 10% off of their next treatment if they make their appointment and keep their appointment. So that's a little bit of a financial incentive. Communication's the key. What we've found is that the big key, it goes back to making sure that appointment is left. And I'll illustrate one difference. Imagine you're coming out of a treatment room. You just got your first BOTOX treatment. Provider looks you in the eye and says, I want to see you back in 4 months, and Haley's going to put you on the books right now, versus, okay, Haley's over here at checkout. She'll talk to you about, next steps. And then Haley says, okay, would you like to rebook? That's when things fall apart. And that's what a lot of medical aesthetic practices do. When it's left up to the administrative staff and phrasing a question like that, which is something we had been doing a little bit too much for our liking, it gives the patient that opportunity to say, you know what, I'm going to check my calendar. I'll call to reschedule in the future. And then you just don't hear from them again. So don't make it an option. Put something on the books and then communicate with them. That's when we do good old-fashioned things like the provider send handwritten thank you notes out to the patients, which is a really old school way of doing things, but it has some impact. And it shows that the provider cares about the patient, and it differentiates a little bit. And it makes it more likely that they'll keep that second appointment. So we've been very pleased. The steps that we've taken over the last 14 to 16 months have really improved our retention rate to where we're well above nation now. But we still have a long way to go, because it's all about that second visit. Because once you get someone to come in that second time, the drop off from the second to the third visit is not nearly as steep. So you've created more of a habitual behavior, which is what we're trying to do, is create habits of coming to our practice versus going to others.
Yeah, it's crazy. The psychological principles, I feel like, are just, they're kind of applicable in every industry. I think I even remember an episode of John Taffer on Bar Rescue for the restaurant industry, talking about how important business was and the strategies to get people from that first time in to the second time to the third time. Because like you said, once you make it a habit and it's just part of their routine, you're changing behavior. You're changing kind of like their instinctual behaviors. So I just had one last thing, Jake, I wanted to ask you about, which was, we talked to a lot of spas that are really, really busy. They're booked out maybe 6 to 8 weeks. And on one of our previous episodes, one of the guests talked about the dangers of being in that situation, because you start to lose patients. People don't want to have to book 6 to 8 weeks out. They want to be able to get in when they want to be able to get in. So you've obviously grown with Skin by Lovely. That's now a multi-location business. What went into that decision, and what advice do you have for spas that are already really busy, but they've kind of reached that threshold where they really can't take on much more business with their schedule as a one-location spa?
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into that, but the other folks that you've mentioned there, they're correct. If they're booked out 6 months and you can't get anyone in, how are you going to grow? That'd be my question to them. How can you possibly grow your practice? Why are you hiring Ricky to do your marketing? Why do you need marketing at this point? If you're doing so well, it sounds like you're on autopilot. So it then comes back to what I mentioned earlier. What do you want to be? What do you want to do? If your focus is on just maintaining a nice lifestyle and having a busy practice, then I say just keep doing what you're doing. And yeah, you're not going to get new patients, but that's a decision that you've made. If you decide that I don't want to expand my physical footprint, but I'd like to make more money, you raise prices. And what's going to happen is that you will lose some customers on the lower end that are a little more price sensitive. You'll maintain those that want to stick with you, but now you'll have room for some new patients. Your margins will go up. If that's not appropriate for you and you don't feel like, well, my patients won't pay more for services, well, that's when you look for additional physical space and additional providers. So that's a leap that a lot of injectors and a lot of providers have a tougher time with for a myriad of issues. Is that they're good at doing what they do. They're good at injecting, or they're good at firing their laser or doing surgery. They're not adept at running businesses and really not sure what to do in terms of hiring and creating job descriptions and training people, because there's a lot of money that goes into that. But the short answer that I give to your question is to, number one, decide what you want to be. How big do you want to be? Certainly there's a big mega trend right now of lots of VC money coming into the space and helping build practices. We've got, I can think of 3 that are over 100 locations right now. You've got others that are on target to be at 100 or more locations within the next few years. That's great. That will never be Skin by Lovely. Skin by Lovely won't be 50. Skin by Lovely won't be 20. And that's based on a decision that we've made, that we like to keep it smaller. We are now, according to everyone that we've spoken to, we're the first employee-owned medical aesthetic group in the medical aesthetic space. So obviously, we've worked with attorneys in the states that we work with to make sure that this is in compliance with corporate practice of medicine laws, so that we're staying within the bounds of the law. But we've done that, and that's been the most powerful thing for us, is bringing in our senior level folks, where they've not been given shares, they've written checks to buy into the company, to the management company that runs Skin by Lovely. So it's given them a great sense of ownership, and they help drive the strategy of what we want to be. But economically, it's a matter of, you don't want to, unless you really want to take on a lot of debt, you don't want to over leverage yourself to create new spaces. You want to make sure that you've got the profitability and the demand to cover. You need to do a capacity and flow study to make sure that you've optimized the physical space that you've got, and that you're not overstretching yourself, and have a thoughtful plan about what you do when you start to fill up those schedules and you're getting to 75, 80% of capacity being utilized. What do you do at that point? Do you adjust price? Do you look for more space? Do you bring on more injectors? What do you do at that point? And it all just comes back to that leader answering the question, what do they want to be? What do they want to do? And that's something that they can answer. They're the only ones who can answer that for themselves.
Agreed. Jake, that was awesome. Thank you so much. We appreciate the insights. Can you tell people where they might find out some more about what you're up to now? I think with Injection U, any other ventures?
Well, thank you for the plug, Ricky. Yeah, no, one of the companies that we own, it's taken off over the last few years, especially post-COVID. There's been a wave of people coming into the aesthetic market. So at Skin by Lovely, we've been asked many times about people coming in and shadowing our providers and learning what we do. So we created a separate company called Injection U. So injectionu.com. People can learn about some of our in-person injection training courses offered in Santa Monica, California, Lake Oswego, Oregon, and Camas, Washington, where they're taking place, and you'll learn directly from one of our expert injectors, getting a full day's didactic and hands-on training, learning how to be a great injector yourself and taking those skills back to your own clinic. So thanks again for the plug, Ricky.
Thanks, Jake. We greatly appreciate it. We'll hopefully have you on again sometime soon.
Would love it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. This podcast is a production of MedSpa Magic Marketing. If your med spa or aesthetic practice is in need of digital marketing services, help with advertising on Facebook, Instagram, Google, lead generation, and booking more appointments, please visit medspamagicmarketing.com.